Cepheus Protocol is an RTS type of game that doesn't deviate much from your generic RTS games such as Company of Heroes, which they mention on their official page to be an inspiration to make Cepheus Protocol, alongside with the book World War Z. However, instead of fighting the Nazis in Company of Heroes, you fight your average Black Friday shoppers inside your local megamall pre, mid, and post-COVID-19. So anyways, a small case of Zaza insufficiency broke out in San Francisco, making the local strip harder than your neighborhood crackhead.
No way!
Because only in California you can run over a mother and child with your car and get away with a slap on the wrist. In reality, the only redeeming factor California has is that it was the setting for the game Fallout New Vegas. But I'm going off topic. So yeah, San Francisco. So a virus broke out called the Pangu virus. No, not the Pingu virus, the Pangu virus. Because, as it turns out, some Chinese eggheads found the virus inside a meteorite that was found in Antarctica. So, the People's Liberation Army of China wanted to take it back to mainland in order to perform studies on it. But we all know this was most likely to make a bioweapon. I know there's a low chance, but to the Chinese person who's watching this, I think I pronounced that correctly. Anyways, so the Chinese brought it to the overlords, but then on one fateful day, a Chinese government ship decided to change its gender to a Land Rover on Half Moon Bay. And just like with Wuhan pre-quarantine, the virus broke out on the ship and spread to San Francisco, which leads us to Patient Zero. But more on that later. So we start off our mission on a US naval aircraft carrier whose name is unknown. But since the US has a habit of naming their ships random names, I'll name it the USS Dog Shit. Currently at our disposal we have a little bird which contains our captain, an engineer, and a random soldier. I decided to take off and invade San Francisco from the south, closest to my ship. And so I touched down in a football stadium to start building a base of operations. To put it simply for the mentally challenged, engineers build shit and are the backbone of your army. Without them, you are practically fucked. However, everything you do costs money. Building, recruiting, using airstrikes, everything costs money. It's kind of ironic that even in an emergency crisis where people are literally tearing each other's guts out, capitalism still applies. America. But anyways, managing your finances in Cepheus Protocol is important, because they don't take food stamps or EBT cards here. Nope, Uncle Sam only wants cold hard cash. And unlike in real life, you can't hide from the IRS here either. A second factor that comes into play is population. This is your limit for the amount of units you can have, which is a max of 80 units in total. So managing money and soldiers is important. But wait. There's more. There's also a logistical aspect to the game where your units rely on ammo and fuel, or even both depending on the unit type you have. But fortunately the game doesn't make that too difficult, so I got nothing to complain honestly. Also, one fun fact of the game is that you can adjust how many female and or male soldiers you want with a slider. So you can go 3 routes here. Number 1, you create an entire incel sausage fest who call Andrew Tate their top G. Or number 2, where gender equality is fully applied, forcing both men and women into conscription. Or number 3, where you create an army entirely composed of women who real life strong independent women will relate to, whilst posting the most brain-dead take on Twitter. But anyways, so after getting a ping on the minimap showing where the infected are throwing it back, I decided to buy a radio operator so I could take care of the bridges that connect my location to the source. You see, radio operators are the only people who can call in airstrikes or other air-related paraphernalia. After destroying the 2 bridges with explosive ordnance, I bought myself some more time to prepare for the absolute onslaught that was about to head my way. So after establishing a nice little base, I decided to send a scout drone to the downtown area. You see, this game has a fog of war system, meaning that despite you being able to see the entire map, you cannot see any activity until you are there yourself. So sending a scouting party to test the waters in the area is actually goated. It is here that I found our main antagonist of the story, Patient Zero. Which brings us to the rules and conditions to win the game. In order to win, you have to eliminate Patient Zero. You do this, you win. Simple as. However, to prevent you from immediately hunting her down like she's on the FBI's most wanted list, the game forces you to collect DNA points to make shredder rounds, which can actually kill her. Normal bullets will just make her temporarily disabled as she regenerates her health, thus making her kind of invulnerable. However, this rule also applies to us. Our captain, Adrian Winters, must not die. Ever. If she dies, you lose. Simple as. So, now that I've been making a fool of myself for a few minutes, let's get into the actual meat of the game. After noticing that the situation got pretty out of hand downtown, I decided to buy some units to send to the infected zone. And after making my way to the infected zone, I wanted to use the repel feature this game has. However, the Chinook did their weird thing where I just wanted to go back home and play Genshin Impact, which happens a lot, might I say, because it was too much of a pussy. So after forcing it to touch grass, I let the boys get out and establish my own personal North Korea. I decided to block off the main two entrances, which leads into my newly claimed compound to prevent squatters from moving in. I then plopped down some tents and helipads to enforce my military ideology on the poor citizens of San Francisco. After discovering that my new compound was filled to the brim with squatters, I issued an evacuation notice to get them all out. Evac helicopters flew in to take the squatters away. This is also where I made first contact with the infected. After noticing I moved into a new crib, the zombies came to say hello, which forced me to gun them down like China did in Tiananmen Square. And I'm glad I wasn't one of the civilians, because at some point they started running crisscross and amongst the zombies while bullets were being shot by my soldiers. So, the situation was getting pretty desperate as the infected now had discovered that I was holding out on some premium Zaza and their numbers grew. I decided to quickly purchase a Black Hawk helicopter to get my troops out in case it gets too dicey. And after a fully schizophrenic attack, I cut down the trees because they were starting to whisper about Ho Chi Minh City. But as it turned out, it was the tank from Left 4 Dead that made all those noises. Now, the situation was getting pretty critical and my soldiers had no support. Fortunately, I managed to slay the beast and reclaim some ground back that was lost. But after catching a zombie that was playing Among Us by hiding in between civilians, yet another big guy showed up. The beast decided my Uber has arrived and threw a car at my soldiers, and before it died due to an overdose on lead poisoning, he had to royally dunk on one last soldier by slamming him into a fucking wall. It was then that I decided to get the fuck out before we all would be turned into meat soup. And so I called off the evac and decided to evac my own boys. I loaded up the Black Hawk, but there was enough space for everyone. I then decided to send in a radio operator that destroyed the bridges to help by ordering some ordnance to hold off the infected whilst rescue was coming for the rest. The situation was getting more dire by the minute, so I called in an operator, which is a pretty cool feature of the game where you yourself can participate in battle by taking control of a special pre-made soldier. Now that I had a hand in the combat myself, it was more manageable to survive until the rescue. But just like in real life, shit can never go right, so in a severe lapse of my judgment, I ordered an airstrike that caused a friendly fire incident. And now with no air support, we were truly fucked. But just as nighttime fell, a Chinook could be spotted over the horizon to save us. And although this could be considered as a loss, and I'm really trying to think here of something, but never mind. So anyways, after we got back to our base, one soldier decided to hide underneath the helipad stairs because his PTSD kicked in. I dealt with him accordingly, thus concluding our first attack mission. So now that my new crib has been claimed by the undead, I was in a mood for a little payback. And so I went all out on the budget. More soldiers, more Chinooks, armored vehicles, and an Apache attack helicopter. Oh, these fuckers didn't know what was coming. The plan was simple, and it was to establish a forward operating base so I didn't have to bother going back and forth so much. The goal was this tiny island on the east that was connected to a bridge that I could blow up. Little did I know that squatters' rights were already enforced by the infected, so I had to forcefully evict them. So on one fateful morning, the sound of helicopter engines could be heard throughout the entire city, and our mission was a go. Everything was going well, until the little bird with our most important personnel took one sip of the McDonald's Sprite and decided to fight the entire fucking ocean. It did not win. Now I had no engineers and only one backup radio operator to blow the bridge, so it came down to improvising. I managed to blow the bridge up with the backup radio operator, but I underestimated the enemy. I forgot to add it on the hardest difficulty, meaning that the enemy spawns and counts are crazy high. So after I struggled to get my soldiers out of the Black Hawk, a giant horde formed on the island which I was completely unaware of. It was until my soldiers got out I realized the reality of my situation. The first two soldiers who reached the ground were blown up by the Apache attack helicopter, who I then promptly banned for team killing. The rest got ripped apart as soon as they touched the fucking ground. I retaliated in the form of a carpet bombing. Now that I'm 2 squads and 1 helicopter down, I was starting to get nervous. Fortunately, the Apache attack helicopter managed to pick off a few zombie spawn points, thus making it safer to land, although it was really struggling with one spawner for some reason. And then I sadly lost 1 armored vehicle after dropping it too early. Now I didn't want to make the same mistake as before by using the rappel feature, so I forced my Chinooks to land and just tossed out the units, which surprisingly worked. The fight was turning in my favor until the Black Hawk containing the last radio operator got shot down off screen. But since I had the advantage of having all units on the ground, I could slowly pick off the remaining heathens roaming this island. After clearing out the last spawner with a shell from the armored vehicle, the island was finally mine. Thus concluding the revenge mission. So, it is here where I found out about another cool feature in the game, the in-game speakers. The in-game speakers allow you to blast copyrighted music at your own leisure. As for me, I had my enemies listening to this.
Holy fuck. I'm coming. Lois. Holy fuck. I'm coming. Lois. Holy fuck. I'm coming. Lois. Holy fuck.
However, and that's real talk, there's one thing you should never do. And I mean never. Seriously. The thing you should never do is play sound on 2 different speakers, because the thing is, it will break your entire fucking game.
Holy fuck. I'm coming. Lois. Holy fuck. I'm coming. Lois. Holy fuck. I'm coming.
I also like the fact that when I was setting up these speakers to show you how the game will crash, when you do that, it caught on to what I was doing, the game, and just decided to crash without me doing anything. But this brings us to the end of my pointless rambling. If you've made it this far, then you can declare yourself a loser like me. If you'd like to berate me in the comments on how trash this video was, then please do. Your anger will be my wanking material for later on tonight. Anyways, Cepheus Protocol is pretty neat, and I had a lot of fun playing the game and making this video. The game currently is still in early access on Steam, but I will definitely be playing it on and off until full release. Thanks for watching, and I won't ask you to subscribe or some shit. Instead, give your mother a call, a reminder that you love her, or tell your dad, or both. Anyways, my name is Jim Setsu, and this was Cepheus Protocol.